the law in question that the Supreme Court has affirmed is actually an extremely old law. In fact, it is 160 years old. It's an 1864 law. Now, this law was passed in 1864. Think about it. It passed really at the end of the Civil War. It was affirmed in 1901, codified again in 1913 when Arizona became a state. That's when they added the exception to save a woman's life. And that law has been on the books, although invalidated by Roe v. Wade. So when Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973, not passed, but when the decision came down from the Supreme Court, 7-2, if I'm not mistaken, basically the court struck down the abortion laws in all the 50 states, including this ancient Arizona law. Now, more recently, in October of 2022, the legislature in Arizona got together and they passed a law in which abortion is banned after 15 weeks. So they passed a new law in 2022 outlawing abortion after 15 weeks. So abortion allowed for the first 15 weeks of pregnancy. And Debbie and I were talking about this. Debbie's like, well, that's a little bit late because it still allows, I mean, at 22 weeks, the sex of the child. Did you say the sex of the child?
14 weeks.
At 14 weeks, you can know the sex of the child. There's already considerable development by this stage. But nevertheless, this swing state, Arizona, which is moderate politically, I would say leaning slightly center-right, passes this law in 2022, which doesn't ban, but restricts abortion after a certain period, namely 15 weeks. Now, when this went to court, as these days, whenever you pass a law, the law gets challenged and it goes before the court. It went before the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals basically ruled that the new law, 2022, supersedes the old law, 1864, and therefore in Arizona, we need to have abortion allowed for the first 15 weeks and not allowed after that. But that was then appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court steps in and makes a decision which, as I say, surprised many people, because what the Supreme Court basically decided is no, both laws are in effect. In other words, the Supreme Court noted that the legislature in Arizona in 2022 did not repeal the old law. They simply passed a new law. Now, so